No. Welcome, everyone, to today's Town of Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is October 20th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, let us know. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31st, 2023. This meeting of the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted via in-person and remote participation and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, and then you have to punch in the conference ID number, which is 351-702-706, and then hit the pound. Or you can join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue/hearing or business item on the agenda during the meeting. To authorize this hybrid form of meeting, we will have a roll call of all board members. Please state your name and whether you're in favor or not. Debat?
James Upson approves this format.
William Grau approves.
Megan Story approved.
Paul C. Semple approves.
David S. Nixon approves.
David R. Thompson approves.
Randy Potash approves.
David H. Veach approves.
I'm not going to go through the usual razzmatazz about how the meeting is conducted because I think everyone here knows that. However, starting today, our COO, one Kathleen Donovan, spoke to me about, and also Sarah and Jay, about the length of our meeting last week. And Randy, it was pretty long, but it wasn't the longest we had on record. The longest one also had to do, I think, with, well, no, we've had some real long ones. But at least no one was popping corks, which we had the last time we had Chat Harbor Lane. Remember that? Yeah. And fortunately, Sarah finally was able to cut the dear lady up. So the general question to everybody is, are our meetings too long? Is there any way you can think of that you would favor shortening them up? And if you think of what we do, we read all the letters that we receive, and that's because we decided a number of years ago that we owe the public this. That doesn't mean we have to continue it. We would have to change our rules and regulations. But there was some talk about time limits. Well, that's great, but time limits usually don't work unless you have some way of enforcing it. You know, a time clock that somehow explodes, or a buzzer, or something that drops from the ceiling. I don't know what. I don't know. So I just wanted to start the conversation. If we actually want to discuss it further, then we would schedule it because the public would have to be invited. But is there an appetite for a change? Paul and Dave and Randy have all offered to read some of the letters for me, but I don't think that's the problem because we have been reading all the letters. And I ask folks, do you want me to read it? And if they say, yeah, I read it. Maybe I don't have to if they're going to speak. I don't know. So, Buck, what do you think about it? Do you got anything up your sleeve to shorten the meetings?
I've always found the Board of Selectmen saying we had to read the same letter that was obviously a form letter over and over and over. I think we're all intelligent enough, and everybody would understand we're volunteers. And we're doing double duty with the extra hearings coming in. I think the chair should feel comfortable going, this appears to be a form letter in your judgment, and we'll read one and then let them go. That's just for starters.
Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. You know, I think the letters that are obviously form type letters, I don't really see the point of having to read those over and over. You know, maybe we could highlight the key points of some of the longer letters to shorten it, but that just seems to be a way to maybe shorten the meetings at times significantly, like last week.
Megan?
I wouldn't read the letters at all. I'd put the onus on people who want to read the letters if we could scan them in and have them online in some sort of accessible format. So it would have to be, you'd have to have a PDF reader as well. So if you had someone who couldn't read them, that they could access them,
Yeah.
which is not very hard, and it only costs about $500 a year. But I just feel like it's a long time, and most of the time we're reading the letters to people who have either written them, know what they're about because they're the attorneys, or have read them beforehand because they're super interested.
It goes back, I'll tell you the history of why we do. It goes back to when the gas station in North Chatham on 28 was owned by the St. Pierre's. And they wanted to convert it into a Cumberland Farms kind of place, you know. Not a chain, but, you know, that sort of variety thing, you know, that convenience store. And the chair at that time he decided not to read about half of the letters, and we had about 70 or 80, didn't we?
But he read half of them, though. He read some of them.
Some of them.
You can't read
And
some.
the flack that we received was unbelievable.
Yeah, but you can't read some and not all. That's
Right.
You'd have to read none or all,
Okay,
because otherwise you look like you could look like you're favoring.
well, that's the way it looked. Paul?
It always amazes me how many people comment to me that they've been watching the hearing and know what was on the agenda and so forth. But I think those people don't have the input of the letters without our reading them. So, and they're not going to come into the department and actually read them at that location. So I guess that I would still be in favor of reading the letters. We can indicate it's a form letter and say which box is checked off if that was the situation. But some of our applicants are savvy enough to adjust the form letter sufficiently that it doesn't quite appear to be a form letter. But I think I would be more inclined to say, let's spread the hearings out more so that we're not dealing with as many on a particular day. Now, that means more meetings, but perhaps they don't have to start that at 2 o'clock or even at 3 o'clock. And they could be held just more frequently.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you. Paul, I hadn't thought about that, but I personally would not mind meeting more often and not having the volume each meeting that we've had recently. I also really think we should have a time limit. If they can do it at town meeting, why can't we just say, okay, let's try to hold it to
I mean, Bill's here. He can handle it.
5 minutes, but you don't have to time it, use common sense. I'm sorry, but I love common sense.
I know you do, but common sense, okay.
Your common sense.
Oh, I like that. Thank you, all right.
Do I get paid for that?
Yes, you do. Okay, Randy?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad you brought this up because I thought about it. And I do agree with what everybody has said, but I think if we do two things, we're going to fix the problem. Number one is to limit the amount of words in the letters, 500 words, which is about 1 page of typed, I believe, or 2 pages double-spaced. It's 500 words, and get a clock, 5 minutes. The clock goes off, sorry, time for the next speaker. 5 minutes, 500 words, should go down like a cold beer on a Saturday afternoon.
Well, I think, I think that I agree with much or most of, perhaps all of what Paul said. I think there certainly have been times, and actually I've missed some of the longest meetings because I had to recuse or one reason or another, which I was happy to do, but, when we get to a 6-hour meeting like this last one, and I remember Megan, her first meeting, it was a 6-hour meeting when we were remote,
And it started at 4.
Yeah, it's sorry for, so I'm happy that I'm happy that we made the effort to start at 2 last week. It's, a lot of it is, I would certainly not, and I think it's kind of intriguing what Megan is suggesting, that maybe we could, just put them in a published form that everyone could reasonably access and read. That's something to consider. I don't know that, when I think about the number of letters that we get in any given meeting, the ones that tend to perhaps ramble or be really long are a minority of them. So I would like to be careful not to overreact to the situations. Now, and that said, it's, probably 95% of the applications that come to us and the letters and things don't add up to a significant problem in terms of the time that it takes to read them, or time for us to, and certainly, and I very much appreciate, Dave, that you really make an effort to include everyone's comments, not just the letters, but folks in the audience. And I think it's really important that we bend over backwards to listen. And I think that's part of what helps keep our board respected, I hope, anyway, to the degree it is. I don't know. I know it's, I imagine Sarah trying to schedule meetings. I think one thing that's perhaps not directly related, but I know we've recently expressed some thoughts about the continuations that we keep getting. And I think if we can get a handle on that, a better handle on that, that could probably help Sarah somewhat with the scheduling. And, sometimes they're just ones that come in that are going to be controversial and engender neighborhood opposition, sometimes opposition even beyond the neighborhood. And in those cases, I just think, unless we were to go to a route where all the letters got published and were available to somebody, I just think that I think we are kind of obliged to just grind through it. I don't know. I do know. I think that at a certain point, too, when we get to a certain length of meeting, I'm not sure we can all give it our best effort. So, I think we do that and we try, but I hate to think that because someone's at the end of an agenda versus at the beginning, there's any difference in how. So that's my concern overall. Thanks.
All right, well,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I fully support the time situation. I don't know what the time should be, but when you address that and consider it, sometimes the main representative comes in with a troop of people. And when you start talking about 5 minutes, the architect might get 5 minutes, the engineer might get 5, the landscaper might get 5. All of a sudden, how are you gonna cut off the conversation if they want to come in with a bunch of people to promote their project?
Yeah, it's, there's no easy solution, but I'm not of a mind to differ from what Paul and the two Daves have said. I like the fact that someone can write us a letter, and we read it. I really do. It's part of what we do, and as Dave Veach was saying, it's part of the trust factor too, I think. But going back to what you were talking about, Buck, we do have the ability with form letters, as it is. We can package them up and just say, the following 8 said the same thing. We can do that, so we don't have to change anything to do that. So I made a huge mistake last week. I hadn't gone through all of the letters on the last one, and one of them ended up with personal attacks on the applicant, and that was my fault. That was on me, because if I had looked at that to begin with, I would have put a big X through it, threw it out. Nope, I wouldn't even start that. So there are ways we can do things, but okay. Well, I just wanted to, have a discussion. If you have any thoughts, if you think that there should be some changes, and just let me know. Let me know. Yes, Bill.
I mean, if we are talking about more meetings versus, having additional meetings versus longer meetings, I guess, I would be in favor of having more meetings
More meetings.
and shortening the time frame of meetings.
I think that would drive the lady to your left off of this board. I really do.
I mean, I'm going to speak for all employed people who work regular jobs with hours during the day. If you want to have meetings every week, that's one thing, but you can't start them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's just not,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, we'd have to take that into consideration if that's the way we go. So let me just ask, is most everybody here in favor of the idea of more meetings? Buck?
I'm never in favor of more meetings.
Bill, I think you said yes. And Megan, you explained that, yeah, maybe, but, what time are you going to start? Paul, you were in favor of it?
Oh, definitely.
Not really, but. I would, that's okay.
And you were saying, okay, very well. That's good input. Okay. Enough of that. Thank you all very much. I have a sad thing to mention, that former member Sabina Dow died, I believe, yesterday or the day before. She was a longtime resident of Chatham, had been a refugee during World War II, and somehow survived in Germany, all that, and married an American service guy, and that's how she ended up here. And she was on this board for I don't know how many years, Sarah, but anyway. So our condolences go out to her family, and sorry to lose her. Okay, back to the business at hand. Sarah, 21-093, please.
Application number 21-093, Benjamin Howard Emery, care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650, owner of property located at 624 Orleans Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 12J, Block 18, Lot 10A. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a nonconforming accessory structure, garage, on a nonconforming lot via the construction of an addition. The existing garage is nonconforming in that it is located 11.7 feet from the northerly abutter and 12.7 feet from the easterly abutter. The proposed addition will be nonconforming in that it will be located 8 feet from the northerly abutter and 1 foot from the easterly abutter, where a 25-foot setback is required. The existing building coverage is 2,532 square feet, 16.4%, and the proposed building coverage is 2,893 square feet, 18.7%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is nonconforming in that it contains 15,452 square feet, where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from January 13th, 2022, May 26th, July 14th, and September 22nd, 2022 for re-advertising.
I was not here for the beginning of this particular application, and Bill was voting for me last time, and Bill will be voting again today for me. So the voters on this application are Buck, Bill, Paul, and the two Daves over here. Mr. Litchfield Where are we?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of brevity, as one who can usually just barely clear my throat within 5 minutes, I will explain that the board conducted a full hearing on September 22nd, as the 7 of you who were there will recall. We made a presentation. You read the lengthy correspondence. The only thing, insofar as I know, that remains to be discussed is conditions, if any. The board was gracious and gave us the guidance of a straw vote. 6 of the 7 people who were here on that day indicated they would vote affirmatively. As for conditions, given the circumstances, I'm not aware that there's any need for any. There will obviously be no parking on Orleans Road, State Highway, and all the work can be contained on site. So having made the presentation on September 22nd, the reason for being here today is simply re-advertising. There was a directional error, east versus west, in the legal ad. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Sarah, did we receive any more correspondence on this?
We did not.
All right. And I'll ask the members if they have any further questions they'd like to ask. Buck?
Buck has no questions.
Bill?
No questions.
Megan?
No questions.
Paul?
No questions.
Dave Thompson, no questions.
No questions?
And I have no questions.
Okay.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that? Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Bill?
Bill votes yes.
All votes yes.
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
Okay, deliberations. Start with Paul.
I think we heard the presentation at the last, or the prior meeting, and I don't see a need for any conditions either, so I think I will move to approve the application as submitted from my viewpoint.
Okay. Deliberations.
I was in favor of this. The 2 neighbors got together and decided one of the big questions of the fact that the building was going to be so close to the line, and everyone's happy, and so I'm in favor of it.
Randy?
If I were voting, I would support it.
Dave?
Yeah, it certainly meets all of our applicable criteria. It's not substantially detrimental to the neighborhood, and I'll support it.
Buck?
So I was the dissenting vote, and I see no reason to change it.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm in support of this as well, I think for all the reasons everyone's mentioned.
Megan?
I would support it as well.
Yeah, I'm not voting, but I would just throw my 2 cents in. I probably would have sided where Buck is, because I'm not convinced that putting a commercial enterprise in a barn a foot away from a property line is not detrimental to the neighborhood. And Mr. Litchfield and I have had discussions in the past about agreements and all that kind of stuff. Well, 3 years from now, Mr. Emery could easily have moved to Commerce Park because his enterprise is that much bigger. And Mrs. Miller could have easily removed herself to Phoenix. And I think there are actually 5 owners of that property, not her. And I would just feel nervous about it. But I'm not voting, so that's the end of what I had to say. Okay.
Based on the deliberations, I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
Buck?
Buck votes no.
Bill?
Bill votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
So that's a successful application, 4-1.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sarah, 22-092, please. I want to sign.
Application number 22-092, 782 Main Chatham LLC, care of Benjamin E. Zender Esquire, 62 Route 6A, Suite B, Orleans, Mass. 02653. Appealed the determination of the building commissioner. The applicant contends that the 5 apartments on the site are legally nonconforming under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 7, for the property located at 782/784 Main Street. Also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 36, Lot 55. The applicant seeks to have the building commissioner's determination overturned. The property contains 18,282 square feet in a GB2 zoning district. The appellant appealed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 8 and 15, and Section 8D2A of the protective bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Zender, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is also represented by its principal, Matt Cole, who's in the second row from the back. We also have Thad Eldridge of East Southeast as our project engineer, as well as Leslie Schneeberger, who is our project architect. I have actually submitted to the board 3 applications, and just as an overview, I understand the board is hearing right now the appeal of the building inspector's determination. We were in front of this board back in 2018 with this project, and the board may recall that the application in front of the board was to take the rear building. You've all been out to the site and seen the site. Rear building has 4 apartments that have been there since at least the mid-1980s, early to mid-1980s. Although based on our research of the town records as well as your own staff's research of the town records, there was a building permit for 2 of the apartments in the back. And then there was also a permit issued for some structural changes for residents in the front, which the town has conceded would be sufficient to establish a building permit for the apartment in the front, which means that there are 3 lawfully permitted apartments on the site. At the time that we made this application, the proposal was to take the 5 apartments in the rear building, remove the rear building, reconstruct it essentially in the same footprint, and have 4 apartments in that building. That would not have qualified as apartments incidental to commercial use under your bylaw. In fact, it would have merely been an alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming use. We ran into some legal issues there in terms of the fact that there were not 4 lawfully pre-existing non-conforming apartments. What we did, in fact, was we asked to withdraw the application from your board in December of 2018. The reason for that was because at the same time, we were also prosecuting an application in front of the planning board for site plan review. And I don't know if the board recalls, but there was fairly significant opposition at that time by a local attorney and some other people to the application. We withdrew from the zoning board so that we could continue to prosecute the planning board application and see if we could get relief there before we came back to your board. We were unable to get that relief from the planning board and ultimately ended up withdrawing that application. The applicant then went back to the drawing board, literally, and redesigned this project to come into conformance with the apartment incidental to commercial use bylaw, which requires that 51% of your building be commercial. That really reconstructed the building in a way that wasn't the most advantageous for the applicant, and we don't believe for the town, but it is a use that's permitted by special permit in Chatham under your GB district regulations, and under Section 7 there are criteria for that use. The problem is that in the GB2 special permit apartments incidental commercial use criteria, which is set forth in Section 7, there's a dimensional requirement or a lot area requirement that says that you're required to have 10,000 square feet of lot area for each apartment. So we submitted a request to the building inspector, Jay. He worked with us very graciously, as did town staff, by the way, over a fairly long period of time to get this question in front of the building inspector. And Mr. Briggs rendered the opinion that this was not a use that could enjoy the benefits of 48 Section 3, which you may recall was passed by the legislature, I believe, in 2016, which said that if you had a structural nonconformity that was in existence for a period of at least 10 years, it could then be treated or would then be treated as a pre-existing nonconforming condition for the purposes of applying for a special permit. Our argument to the building inspector, our argument today here is that this is not a use condition, because use is permitted in the district, but that the existence of these apartments since the mid-1980s, 5 apartments in that rear building, violated the dimensional requirements of the bylaw under your Section 7 apartments incidental commercial use bylaw, which came into effect in 1992, such that that dimensional quality, that dimensional or structural nonconformity, after the period of 10 years, then ripened into a pre-existing nonconforming condition, such that now this is in fact a pre-existing nonconforming condition under 48 Section 3 that is capable of being reviewed by this board as a special permit. It's a tricky question. We're used to dealing with setbacks, height, the deck that's too close. Those are clearly structural components. We're used to dealing with use questions. Are you using it for a restaurant? Are you using it for, for a commercial use or a residential use? This is one of those questions that kind of falls down the middle. If you don't meet the dimensional requirements, is it structural or is it use? We believe that it's a use question. We believe that it's a structural question. And Mr. Briggs, and thank you, Mr. Briggs, clearly said this is a dimensional condition, in his thing. He didn't say it was structural, he said it was dimensional. So the first question that I'm asking the board to determine here is whether or not the building inspector erred in his interpretation of the local bylaw in 48 Section 3. I can tell you in my history as an attorney, which is hopefully will draw to a close sometime soon, I've only overturned building inspectors maybe 3 or 4 times. So I understand that there's a necessity and a feeling among zoning boards that they need to rely upon their building inspector. But at the same time, you are the judicial body that reviews building inspectors' determinations and determines whether or not they are in fact correct. So based on the board's determination in this matter, in this particular application, we will then be asking the board, if the board finds that this is in fact a pre-existing non-conforming use by reason of the length of its being there and the statute, we will ask the board to consider a special permit for the application for the 3 apartments over the commercial space in the area. If the board upholds the building inspector, we will present it as a variance question. And as you know, even though your variance bylaw differs from 48 Section 10 by adding in the word structure in several instances, it does provide for structural variances and, in addition to dimensional variances or conditions affecting the structure as opposed to just the land. It's a higher hurdle for us. It's a good project. It's a well thought out project. We've been working on it for a long time. Just by way of history, HBDC has approved this project twice in its former incarnation and in the present incarnation. The planning board went through a long and we think meticulous review of this project, imposed certain conditions on the project, and they approved it on August 1st of this year. So we think that we're in a position where the project itself is a good project. We would much rather present this as a special permit application to the board, and we do think that based on the statute and the statutory language of 48 Section 3 and the fact that this is in fact a dimensional requirement, the land is dimensionally connected to the use of the apartments, that this is in fact a structural condition that is available to be available under 40 Section 3. We ask that you respectfully and gently overturn the building inspector's determination and allow us to proceed with the special permit. And thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this application, either here or on Microsoft Teams? If so, please indicate you'd like to speak.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Okay. I think it would be appropriate now, Mr. Briggs, to interject you into the conversation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Briggs, Building Commissioner. I agree with Mr. Zender. It is a dimensional issue in as much as the property contains 18,000 plus square feet of buildable upland. You need 10,000 square feet per apartment incidental to a commercial use, which means they would need a 50,000 square foot lot to get, or a 40,000 square foot lot to get the number of apartments they're looking to get right now. I have the issue with there were only 3 apartments permitted on site, and 48.7 speaks to provides a 6-year statute of limitations for permitted apartments or work, which covers both the structural violations and if there are any permitting errors. If we issued a permitted error, there's only 6 years to catch that error and straighten it out. But 2 of the 4 apartments in the rear building were never permitted by the building department. So we've only been able to validate 3 apartments on the site via building permits, 2 clearly. The one out front by way of a building permit application for a stairway to the apartment. Therefore, based on the acts of 2016 to clarify Mass General Law, Chapter 48.7, I see that only the continued use of 3 apartments on the site.
Thank you. I think we'll now have, well, I've asked the audience if anybody wants to speak in favor. Is there anyone in the audience, either here or on Microsoft Teams, who wishes to speak against the application?
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition.
Okay, then let's have questions from the board. Let's start off with Dave Veach.
Well, actually, just to clarify, Ben, you mentioned a couple of times in your just recent presentation, I think you mentioned 5 apartments in the rear building. Didn't you not mean 5 apartments on the property?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. There
Yeah,
are
it's okay. I just wanted to.
5 in the rear building, 1 in
Just-
the front. Yeah, I misspoke.
Well, it's 4 in the rear building,
Yeah,
1
4 in the rear and 1 in the front,
Okay,
5
that's right.
total.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank
thanks. The amendment to Chapter 40 of 2016 is that the section that put in that clarified the 10-year ability to have something then considered as a pre-existing non-conforming? I don't remember. I don't know.
A little differently, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Prior to the 2016 amendment, the statute provided that there was a 6-year statute of limitations for the town to compel removal of structures that violate zoning that were constructed with the benefit of a building permit. And that there was a 10-year statute of limitations that the town could not compel removal of structures that were built without a building permit. So prior to 2016, the statute had nothing to do with whether you treated something as a special permit or a variance. It just said the town couldn't come back and make you remove it. So you had 6 years with a building permit, you were home free. 10 years without a building permit, you were home free. So there's no question that this structure, the town can't compel it to be removed or stop being used as a present apartment based on the land area. This change in 2016 said that if there was a structure that was there for 10 years, that would otherwise have required a variance, it can now be treated as a special permit, as a pre-existing non-conforming structure. Was that a good explanation?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I'm trying to sort through some confusion in my mind over this entire issue. But essentially, I think you pointed out that the apartment building in the back, or buildings, I don't know, was it 2 buildings that were moved there, or 1 building? I'm not sure.
One in the back.
The one in the back, okay. And it's, as far as we know, it's had 4 apartments in it during that entire time, but only 2 of them in that building were permitted, we find, in looking through the records. Is that?
Yeah, the history is that the owner of the building, I think it might have been Mr. Riley, if I remember correctly, came in and sought relief to make the whole building apartments, couldn't get the relief, was able to permit 2 apartments, and then at some point, and it may have happened right away, the entire building was converted to apartments. We believe it's been apartments since the early to mid-1980s.
Okay, so they attempted to put 4 apartments on the record, and it didn't happen.
I don't remember the number, but there was an attempt.
Something,
There
yeah.
was an attempt too.
And I also noticed in some of the reasons that the requirement for the 10,000 square feet upland for apartments incidental to use was that post-dated this building being moved onto the property.
I believe that Section 7 apartments, I believe it was 1992. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it was 1992 as it was enacted.
I believe it was amended in 92.
Amended in 1992. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So.
And there was no, I mean, all right, so they tried to get 4 apartments on, was that with the planning board, zoning board of appeals?
It was the zoning board of appeals, and I just don't remember whether it was 4 apartments. I just don't remember what the number was. But I remember the discussion was that the requirement, there was a discussion about having it be office space and conference space and all that, and that's what it ultimately was presented as. Is there was some office space in the back, and then there were apartments.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
So Ben, nobody's arguing over the 3, the 1 in the front and 2 in the back. Is that correct?
No, as I understand the position of the building commissioner is that, we've demonstrated the lawful existence of 3 apartments. We can certainly keep 3 apartments there in total.
1 in the front and 2 in the back?
And 2 in the back, yes.
And your position is that the 2 that the building commissioner is saying weren't permitted, you're agreeing to that, but saying because of the 6-year and the 10-year law, they fall under the grandfather, and so they now are a special permit and not a,
Well, yeah, what we're saying is that the 6 and 10-year statute apart, that just said the town can't make you remove them. We're not really dealing with that at this point. What we're saying is that because there were 4 apartments in the back, or 5 total on the property, that violated the dimensional requirement of 10,000 square feet per apartment for over 10 years. It's been since the 80s or 90s. Because it has violated that dimensional requirement, we're allowed to keep a structure there and rebuild a structure there under a special permit that still exceeds that dimensional requirement. So we can keep, what we're suggesting is that we're allowed to keep 5 apartments on the property. We're actually coming in with an application to knock it down an apartment to 4 total. And just by way of explanation, and we'll get into this in the special permit and the variance, what the applicant's done already is reconfigure this as an apartment incidental to commercial use, which means that they're essentially making the downstairs a commercial use. That's not really the highest and best use of this property in Chatham. You know, residential use is the highest and best use. Apartment use is really what's needed in this area. They're already giving up half of the area of this building for a non-residential use. To take the remaining area and make 2 apartments out of it, 2 larger apartments, really works against both the applicant's interest and the town's interest, because what you're doing is you're creating large apartments which would rent for more money. You would have 2 apartments renting for, let's say, $3,500 a month, as opposed to 3 apartments at, $1,800 to $2,000 a month, more of a workforce housing situation. It's a better situation for the town with no changes dimensionally in the building, meaning no physical changes observable. The only real changes are the increased intensity of use in terms of additional parking spaces required. That's been addressed through the planning board. We already have the parking there that we need through the planning board. We've gotten the waivers we need. So what the applicant really wants to do is to build 3 apartments that would meet their needs and the needs of the town in a much better way than building larger apartments inside the building. So I'm sorry, Buck, I kind of jumped ahead with the argument on the special permit and the variance, but I was trying to give you all a background as to where we are with this. So.
I was trying to just focus on the appeal.
Yeah, I know. Well, so the appeal here is, again, to beat the horse in front of all of you, we believe that we're grandfathered in for 5 apartments based on 48 Section 3.
So I would like to ask the building commissioner, if it's okay, Jay. I'm assuming you don't agree with that argument.
I don't agree with part of it. I don't agree that the 4 units can remain. That rear building was moved there as a duplex, 2-family house. In 1985, it got approval, got a building permit for 2 apartments incidental to a commercial use. So some point after that time, the commercial use was converted to 2 additional apartments. I don't know how the town would know about that. It was done without a permit. So the structure is safe because it's been there more than 10 years, and the structure was actually permitted to be moved there. But the use is not protected because it was never permitted to be.
So your rebuttal is that the use does not fall under the 6 and 10-year law.
That's my position. I'm not an attorney. I know you use that line a lot, Buck. But, if someone were to do make 6 or 8 apartments there, would those 6 or 8 apartments be protected? I think not. I think that we still have to go by what was permitted and what the town believes the use to be.
So potentially, the additional 2 apartments in the rear building were probably or possibly put in without a permit, without going through the building department, and as a result of that, I'm asking the question, what do you have to do? Go around every year and verify that nobody's put in extra apartments? I mean, that law gets me a little.
We don't do that, but, we have records, building records back to the 60s and some to the 50s. These were moved here in the 84, I believe, and the 2 apartments were permitted in 85. And in 95, we had the permit for the staircase to the 2nd floor apartment in the front building. So we have a history of different permits that were applied for and issued, but we just never got anything on the additional apartments out back.
But I think what I'm hearing from the representative is that the two unpermitted ones, the responsibility of the town is to find that out or identify it within 6 or 10 years, and if they don't, it then becomes permittable under special permit.
I believe that's what he's saying, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Incidentally, Sarah has put on the screen a little history up there, Sarah. Could you tell us what that is?
This is the building permit history, building special permit and site plan approval history for this property that we were able to find from our records in community development.
Good, thank you. Bill?
I'm interested about well, first of all, the ownership of this property. Has it been in the same ownership back then to now, different ownership? No. When did the ownership change?
72, I'm not sure what year you bought the property, Matt. Matt Call's the owner of the property, the principal of the owner.
So if you scroll down a little bit further, there's a building permit pulled in 2013, which is a building permit we pulled, and I believe at the time we were a tenant and purchased the property approximately a year later. So somebody might have the assessor's records and know better than my recollection.
It was 2015.
2015, okay. So we were a tenant at that time, improved the front building. Obviously weren't involved in the rear building at that time, so we were a tenant up front until we purchased the property in 2015.
So in 2015, you purchased both buildings basically in the land.
Correct.
And was it in the same ownership from the time the building in the rear was moved there up to that point, or had it changed hands?
No, I believe it was, I think it might have been Bill Riley owned it, if I remember correctly, and then, I think Ron owned it
I
after
purchased
that.
it from, Lighthouse Realty, I believe.
Yeah, so I think there were two owners prior to Cape Associates. I think it went from Bill to Ron Rudnick and then into Matt.
Okay. And as far as you know, the apartments, has there been full occupancy the whole time? I mean, what's been the occupancy kind of status over the years?
Maybe Matt can address, he's been in the building to see what his observations are of the building, but I believe they've been rented.
Yes, so when we took over the property, I believe all 5 units were occupied. The unit in the front building has been occupied by the same tenant that we inherited through today. The rear buildings, it's been a little less consistent, a little less spotty. I'm not sure how many are rented at this point. But when we took over, my recollection is there were 5 tenants at that time.
So right now in the back, you're not sure if they're rented or?
I know we're not fully occupied. I want to say that
Oh.
only 1 or 2 are occupied at the present moment.
Okay.
And the building is in significant bit disrepair.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I saw that.
I don't think the intention is to try to keep running this building, as it is, so.
I mean, I think most of my other questions were answered with some of the other questions that were asked, but at some point then, just so I know in my own mind, that this thing, it went from a 2-building permitted apartment building to a 4 by someone. Unsure when.
It feels to us like it was, Matt's been in the units.
So, when I've been in the building very few times, there's clearly 4 units, there's clearly 4 different kitchens. It was clearly rented as 4 separate units for a significant period of time. The building's in disrepair. We've been trying to do this project for years, so we certainly didn't want to maintain full occupancy. I very much appreciate the track record of the permitting and whatnot, but part of the assumption that I think everybody's baking into their assessment right now is that the town records are pristine, that there was no permit pulled for additional permits, and that permit wasn't lost. I mean, as a builder that does construction in many towns on the Cape, town records are not pristine, so there's always that case as well. So I personally am not going to jump to the conclusion on what was or wasn't permitted previously, because I just don't know.
Based on the condition of the building, you know, it's hard to tell, but it feels to me like it was converted to 4 apartments relatively soon after that denial.
Then denial.
Yeah, I would imagine, you know, those management of the facilities are fairly old, so.
Okay, I think that's it.
Megan?
Couple questions just on clarification, because sometimes I can be a little dim. So, there are 5 apartments there now. I don't care if they're occupied or not. There are 5 apartments. You are seeking to go to 3 apartments in the back with maintaining the one that's in the front?
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, I have a few comments that I'll save for deliberations, I guess. I think most of my questions have been answered.
Oh,
We appreciate a very detailed and expert presentation by your people and yourself. I guess my question is, in 2018, you were in here for a variance for the same issue. And at that time, it was not your position that a special permit was possible, but rather that a variance was required.
yeah.
So I'm not clear on what has changed in that timeframe.
It was a very different application. It was, at that time, the application was to convert the building or just to rehabilitate the building and keep the apartments in it. We weren't going into the apartments incidental to commercial use, which is usable right in the district. So that was going to require a use variance to have apartments in that district. So that was what we were coming in front of the board for, was a use variance. We understood at the time that it was a difficult presentation of the board to get a use variance, but we never really presented the board with the opportunity to deliberate on it because we had our own problems with planning at that point. And we decided to withdraw the application from zoning to get the project itself, just in terms of the practical aspects of the layout and the design and the site aspects, through planning, and get that approval first, because without the planning site plan review process, we just didn't want to fight the battle on zoning. And in fact, that was a battle. And we weren't able to get where we needed to be with that project, so we withdrew, went back, redesigned, and recharacterized it and redesigned it as apartments incidental, meaning the whole lower floor is commercial. So at that time, to get the long answer to your short question, Paul, is that was a use variance for apartments in the GB2 district. Now we're seeking, depending on your determination, either a dimensional variance from the land area requirement for apartments for use that's permittable by special permit, and a special permit for the apartments under the GB2 district, as well as, and if you uphold the building inspector, we're seeking the dimensional variance and the special permit. If you overturn the building inspector, we're just seeking the special permit. Did that answer the question? I see Megan nodding her head there, so you might want to,
I guess somewhat, but we don't have authority to grant a use variance, do we?
I don't believe that you do. You have the authority to grant structural variances.
Right. So
dimensional
when you say
variances.
that you were looking for a use variance in 2018, I'm confused by that.
We believed at the time, and we still believe, that it was a pre-existing non-conforming use that would entitle us to get a special permit at the time. The staff's position and the building inspector's position was you're not a pre-existing non-conforming use because you haven't demonstrated this use, and therefore you need a use variance to have an apartment complex in this area. So we backed off of, I could be wrong, but we backed off of just straight apartments in that building, which is not permittable in that district, and we went to apartments incidental to commercial use.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
I'm
we
sorry,
need dimensional
go-
variance as well, yeah, thanks. Go
To
ahead.
clarify, we
Yeah.
were applying at that
could you
time.
identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Leslie Schneeberger, SV Design.
Thank you.
representative of the applicant. We were at the first hearing, we were applying for a dimensional variance. The existing buildings are over the existing setbacks, and the design originally had been utilizing those existing overages, existing nonconformities. We've since redesigned the building so that it is meeting all the setback requirements. There are no dimensional variances with the design where previously there were. which you would have forgotten because you
I
weren't doing
did, I
the.
didn't remember, yeah.
As I recall it, you were looking at a variance for about 3 issues. One of them was your setback issues, and one was with respect to 50% of the building being used for commercial. And the third one was for buildable upland, and your 50,000, in that case, 50,000 square feet. And now, instead of 50,000, it's 40,000, I guess, but that issue doesn't change. That was, at that time, was your position was that was needed a variance, and you requested one. As it turned out, I guess some of the discussion perhaps indicated that may not be possible or wouldn't be possible, but I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything factually different in terms of this that would change your position that you needed a variance.
Well, it changes, first of all, no dimensional variance required from the setbacks. And then, obviously, we still believe that, we're pre-existing non-conforming on the dimensional upland requirement, but we'll present the application for the variance for the dimensional upland. And so that's the remaining variance that would be required if you overturn the building, if you uphold the building inspector.
That was my question, because at the time, you said you needed a variance for the dimensional upland requirement.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, I have no further questions.
okay.
Dave,
I have no questions for Mr. Zender.
Thank you.
Randy,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the owner, the present owner, is he also the landlord?
He would have to be, yeah, he's the owner,
And someone's living there right now?
yes.
Okay, so it just seems confusing that you wouldn't know how many people are living there now, if you're the landlord.
My staff collects rent, deals with that, I don't do that personally.
Oh, okay. And also, would this be affordable housing at all?
It's not big A affordable housing, because this is not, we're not presenting this under the affordable housing bylaw. It's what we call small A affordable housing. It's, if we obtain the permission, it's 3 relatively small apartments over a commercial building. It's not going to be attractive to high-end customers. And the amount of rents that they'll be able to secure for this will mean that it's in that range for, what we would call small A affordable housing.
So is small A also known as attainable housing?
Yes, well, to the extent that yes, it would. I mean, I don't know if Matt has a rent range for these apartments, but
Attainable's not a recognized designation in this town officially, but yes, I say as a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, that it would be, small A in this case would be considered attainable housing.
And that's why we want the 3 units instead of the 2.
So does the Affordable Housing Trust support this, if you know?
We haven't gone to them. It's not an affordable housing project,
No.
so
No, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I've never heard the term attainable housing before.
okay, any other questions that have popped up? No? Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave, seconds.
Need a vote on that, Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
Paul votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave?
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, deliberations. Bill?
I guess, if we're just dealing with the issue of Jay's decision and, at this point, I would 100% support what he said, and I'll leave it at that.
Megan?
I like you, Jay, this has nothing to do with you, but in this particular case, it's tough. I would not ordinarily want to overturn anything that you had said, but I do believe that their argument is correct, and I also believe, and this could come from my slant as a housing advocate, I'm not even gonna go with affordable, just a workforce housing advocate in this town, that 10,000 square feet for an apartment in a downtown area is ludicrous. So that is a whole nother aside, but I would lean to supporting overturning your decision. Please don't hate me.
Paul?
Well, I think that we can talk about affordable housing and attainable housing, and we can talk about 10,000 square feet and so forth, but those are what the ordinances are to the extent that they exist. Affordable housing, at least at this point, is not one of our criteria. I think that the applicant approached it correctly with the idea that they needed in 2018 a variance with respect to this particular requirement, with respect to upland buildable area, and that the conclusion of the building commissioner is correct. So I think what we have to do is uphold the building commissioner's determination and then move on to the question of whether it's appropriate to grant a variance.
Dave?
Thank you very much. I am going to side with the building inspector and support him.
Randy?
For the reasons stated by Paul quite eloquently, I support the building inspectors also, because it's only, the statute really only applies to permitted apartments, and two are permitted, so.
Dave Beach?
Well, I'm still torn, so I think that, I guess where I come down on this is that sometimes the wording of the law and the interpretations of the law are, I don't necessarily 100% agree with the end result. But I think in this case, I think that I'm going to side with Jay on his determination with respect to this. And I do that kind of in a way, sort of regretfully, because there's a part of me would like to be able to say, hey, look, the apartments have been there a long time. The town needs apartments. That's not the place. But I think I can. I'm going to side with Jay in this, and I'm going to just look at how I can take my other takes on this and apply them to the variance request.
Buck?
Well, I wish the argument was more black and white, but I have to say it's a cloudy, murky. I'm not comfortable saying yes or no either way. I just, it's confusing. The only thing I can say is when it's confusing, I've worked with Jay. I have the greatest respect for Jay. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. I came in here expecting that.
I got to flip a coin, and I'm going with somebody I know, so I'm going with the building commissioner.
Yeah, I'm going to side with Jay. When you look back at what happened when it was moved in, I guess, 1815, yeah. How about that? How about 1915? Anyway, what was it, 1985? Whenever it was moved in, and they applied for extra two, and they were turned down. And so then, somebody along the line ignored that and whacked in two more apartments. And I can't justify overturning Jay when what they did was illegal. So,
Can I just
I
ask,
know.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? It doesn't go against what, I just have a question. So with regard to the onus being on the town for finding out about, is that part of the argument? I'm just curious. Okay. Because
It's
I'm
not.
just curious what that is. Like, is there a time frame, or it's just,
No,
you're never grandfathered in, right?
Mr. Chairman,
Or are you?
if I might, and I want to address Ms. Potash's question, her comment. I want to make sure that we keep this clear. The 48 Section 3 amendment in 2016 has nothing to do with when somebody found out about something or even whether they got a permit for it. It just says that if you've had that nonconformity for 10 years, and if it would have required a variance, then you're then treated as pre-existing non-conforming. It has nothing to do with whether you did something wrong or right or anything else.
Even if the nonconformity was illegal, if you
Even if it's-
had it, okay,
yeah,
that was kind of my
even if-
question.
So, take it back a step. Let's just give you an example. Somebody goes out and has a house that's fully conforming, and then at some point they go build a deck that is non-conforming. They build a deck that goes 4 feet into the setback, right? If that was built with a building permit, the town has 6 years to say, you're gonna have to remove that. If it was built without a building permit, the town has 10 years to say, you're gonna have to remove that, okay? Either of those actions don't cure that nonconformity. So with the old statute, that deck could be there for 30 years, and it still has to be treated as a non-compliant structure. You don't get the benefit of it as a pre-existing non-conforming structure. When the statute passed in 2016, it said that if something was there for 10 years, regardless of who knew about it or why it got built, it then is recharacterized as pre-existing non-conforming. So we're just saying that in this case, it's not as simple as a deck. I mean, decks are easy.
Because
right?
this is a use, not a
Well, what we're
structure.
saying is that we're saying it's not even used. It's a dimensional requirement for the number of apartments that you have.
Okay.
So we're saying that because the apartments, there were 4 apartments back there, or 5 on the property, and the property didn't have 50,000 square feet of upland, that dimensional violation, once it existed for 10 years, it became a pre-existing non-conforming dimensional violation. So it has nothing to do with doing something wrong. It just has to do with the fact that it's there. So.
Okay, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing. I guess I've already done that.
You did that.
I did that already. All right, in that case, I'll move to approve the application, I'll move to approve the appeal, which would overturn the building commissioner's determination.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay. We
Miss-
need a yes or no vote. Buck?
Mr. Chairman, I have one request for the board, just because I get paid to do this. If the board is willing, I would ask that you open the other 2 hearings and let us present on the special permit and the variance and let you vote on all 3 applications at the same time. It gives the board, I don't think it's going to change the vote, but it just allows us to explore the variance and the special permit criteria and allow you to take vote on all 3 applications at the same time.
Well, won't you have that anyway?
If you vote right now on this and you vote to uphold Mr. Briggs, which I expect you will, you're locked into that position, which means that if you decide after looking at the variance and wrestling with it and everything else, I'm worried that, again, we're going to present the variance, and again, I'm projecting here. We kind of like this application. We want the apartments. We think the applicant's done a good job and they've worked with this. We just can't find that you meet the variance standard. You could go back and revisit your analysis of the application of 48 Section 3. And so I'm just asking if you would be willing to open the other 2 hearings, let us present on the special permit first, because we need that, or present on the variance first, and then you can take all of your votes at the same time, record those votes, and we can leave.
Well, Sarah listed it as was presented by you to her. And so I can't see changing the order of things. So I think we'll have the vote now on Mr. Briggs, and then we'll go on to it's the special permit that you asked for second, right? No, I'm sorry, the variance you asked for second.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, that I filed those in any particular order, thinking they would be taken up by the board in any particular order. But
Yes, please.
So if the board upholds or overturns the building commissioner's determination, then it's solely the special permit. If the board upholds the building commissioner's determination, then the applicant is required to seek both the variance and the special permit.
Okay.
So, depending on how the board votes, we could theoretically do both the variance and the special permit at the same time, read both ads, or you can hear them individually. It depends on how you vote on the first application.
Okay, so, Buck, vote.
I want to make it simple. I want to support the commissioner. Do I vote yes or no?
You vote no.
No.
Paul?
I vote no.
Dave?
No.
Dave?
No.
And I vote no, that's unanimous. Okay. So I think we properly should go on to the variance. So that's 22-093, please, Sarah.
Application number 22-093, 782 Main Chatham LLC, care of Benjamin E. Zender, Esquire, 62 Route 6A, Suite B, Orleans, Massachusetts, 02653. Owner of property located at 782-784 Main Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 36, Lot 55. The applicant seeks a dimensional variance from the required buildable upland area for apartments incidental to a commercial use. The proposal will create 4 apartments on site where 3 permitted apartments exist. The property contains 18,282 square feet in a GB2 zoning district. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protected Bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request for a variance, the board has, as part of your application package, a set of existing plans and a set of proposed plans for the project, including interior floor plans, elevations, site plan, existing and proposed site plans. And I'll inform the board again that the planning board has approved a site plan review permit for the plans that the board has in front of it. HBDC has also approved the project. So, and from the last time that this was presented to the board, as Leslie told you, we're no longer seeking any kind of a dimensional variance for setbacks. The building is conforming with regard to height and location, mass, volume, and all those aspects. So the applicant can build the building. What they're asking for is a dimensional variance from the upland land requirement of 50,000 square feet required for, I'm sorry, 40,000 square feet required for 3 apartments in the back and 1 apartment in the front. The standard is set forth in General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 10. It's also set forth in a slightly different format in your bylaw, in Section, I believe it's 8D, 8D2. The applicant has to demonstrate that they will suffer a significant hardship, financial or otherwise, if they are not afforded the relief. And the relief under your bylaw has to be due to a factor or circumstances relating to the soil condition, shape, or topography of such land, structure, or building, and especially affecting such land, structure, or building, but not affecting the zoning district as a whole. And finally, the applicant has to demonstrate that the relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or the purpose of the bylaw. Now, the intent or the purpose of the bylaw here is that you limit the number of apartments on a piece of property to 1 per 10,000 square feet. That's the purpose. We have here already an existing building which has more than the amount that are requested. We have 5 on the property. We're going to 4. So we're reducing the number of apartments. So therefore, we're actually making the property more beneficial in terms of the bylaw intention. Additionally, the purpose of your bylaw, and more particularly your more recent iterations of the bylaw, are to promote housing in the community and what we call attainable housing, which is a term I just didn't know about half an hour ago. But what I like to call small A affordable housing. There's also a purpose in the bylaw to bring up the value of structures and make them more attractive and safe. And there's also a purpose in the bylaw to make sure that that business in the town can operate and can operate safely and conveniently. This particular application not only creates commercial space in the ground floor of this building, which will be available to people in the town to rent or use, or the applicant may use themselves, but it also will create 3 new, not large apartments in the center of Chatham, which will be available within walking district for older people, will be available as workforce housing, will be available for employees of the company. And those 3 units, as I told you earlier, will be more affordable and more usable as attainable housing than 2 larger units, which is what the applicant will be building if they don't obtain the variance relief. So we believe that the 3 smaller apartments are completely in line with the intent and the purpose of the zoning bylaw. Finally, and the hardship to the applicant is that by having to build 2 apartments instead of 3, they don't really meet their own needs for meeting the housing needs that they have to offer to the town. Meaning, if they build the 2 units, they are, and I don't know this for a fact, whether the total rents will be less, but they'll probably lose money relative to the investment that they have. They're already devoting the entire ground floor of this building to commercial use, where they really would like to have had the entire building be available as apartments. So they're already taking some monetary losses on a property they've owned for some time now. And that's their financial hardship. And then it has to be tied to a condition, and this is where it gets difficult. Again, your bylaw is giving me fits. It says a condition relating to soil condition, shape, or topography of such land, structure, or building. Structure or building, those words don't show up in 48 Section 10, okay? So what we're presenting to you is that this particular building is not like most buildings in Chatham. It's a large building that was moved onto the site. It was built around 1900, it was moved onto the site in the mid-1980s. It's presently configured for apartments. It's a very long, narrow lot. It doesn't lend itself to putting a house, back in that area as well as what's there now. And that this condition affects this building, and it affects it uniquely because of the way that it's been built and moved and created over the years. So that condition is such that it's unique to this building. And because of those factors, the board can grant this, and the board can afford different weights to different parts of this component. You can make your own factual findings and afford your weights. We think that the benefit to the town, the benefit to the applicant, getting this building rebuilt and getting this housing out there is such that this variance is a variance that can and should be granted by the board.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Is there anyone here or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak either in favor of this or against it? Either one.
I see no one that wishes to speak. Elaine Gibbs has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been following this since 2018, and I have a lot of problems with it, and in no particular order. Originally, these were going to be condominiums that were going to be sold for over $1 million. One of the problems is that I think the way that this is configured is worse than the design before. There's now only one entrance into the area. The parking formula that they used, they said there was only going to be 430 square feet of public space for commercial use because people weren't going to be going in there. And I don't know how they can claim that when the commercial space is not rented out yet. And if it's rented out to attorneys or real estate brokers or architectural firms, they will all have clients that will be coming in and needed parking, in addition to the fact that the planning board has said they must have at least 2 parking spaces for each of the apartments. I was very concerned during the presentation to the planning board that they said, well, if there's not enough room for parking, either employees or visitors can park at the post office, they can park at the community center, they can park at Oyster Pond, they can park at the public parking area. We have a problem with parking. And to say that they're building a plan that will likely not have sufficient parking on their own property in order for the commercial businesses to do business and for the tenants, I think is counterintuitive and is not good for the town as a whole. We already have parking problems. I don't think it's compatible to the neighborhood. This is going to be a significantly larger structure. And there's going to be another one coming before you in a week or two, right 2 lots down with the old Monomoy Theater that's doing the same thing in terms of putting in more residential. So I would ask that you consider not approving this. Too many properties in Chatham, downtown, have been converted into condominiums, and residential, and there is no attainable housing. So I guess my question to you would be, if you approve this based on the fact that you've been told here tonight that these are going to be attainable housing and only rented, and then we find out after the fact that they have decided to sell these units, likely to summer people who will rent them out as short-term rentals, increasing traffic in that area, is there any recourse? Or can you make that a condition of the property, that these are to remain apartments for workforce housing? That's what was said tonight. And, I seriously question whether that is going to actually happen down the road. Let me see if I have anything else here. I'm very concerned that the entire downtown, the complexion is changing, and there is not going to be room for apartments to be rented at attainable prices. If the attorney has not heard the word attainable, I mean, there is a definition for it. It's 2 times the affordable housing income that is before the state. And if he's saying that's the case, then I would hope that that is exactly what happens. So again, I think that it's much too big. I don't think it's compatible with the neighborhood. I think you're going to be shocked at the size of it once it goes up. And the fact that there's only one entrance now, and part of it is an easement with the neighbor next door, Sweet Tomatoes, is going to make it very congested and cause, I think, serious issues for the downtown areas in terms of traffic and parking. I think that's basically it, and this would apply to this variance and even the special permit that's coming up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
So right now, we're taking those in favor of the application. We will take those in opposition after the correspondence are read into the record.
The first thing we have is a certificate of appropriateness. This is from the Historic Business District Commission. On September 1st, 2021, the commission voted 4 in favor, 0 in opposition, 1 abstaining to approve this variance. Then on September 1st, 2021, the first was for the demolition of the structure. The second is to construct a new dwelling. It's interesting, they use the word dwelling, okay? Then we have a memo. This is from our health agent, Judith Giorgio. She writes on 7/18/2018. This property is currently connected to the Chatham Municipal Sewer System and is approved for a total of 1,080 GPD. The apartment building to be demolished, 784 Main, has a total of 8 bedrooms. The front building, at 782, has a 1-bedroom apartment and an office space for a total of 200 GPD. Floor plans on the proposed 3-unit dwelling depict a total of 6 bedrooms for a total of 7 on the property. There appears to be adequate sewage flow for the dwelling units and the proposed office space. The existing dwelling units, when last inspected, were in poor condition, and the plan to add 3 new housing units as proposed is acceptable to the health department. Then we have a letter. This is from Kenneth and Jill Price. They write on October 17th of 2022. This letter is being submitted by Kenneth and Jill Price. We are the owners of 22 Post Office Lane, Chatham, Mass., which is identified as the westerly abutter on the plans associated with the above referenced applications. We purchased this home in Chatham in 2004. We rely on the rental income to assist us in paying the mortgage and expenses. The majority of the rentals are during the peak season. Overall, we are in favor of the project proposed by 782 Main Chatham LLC. When we attended the ZBA meeting held on August 9, 2018, as well as several other meetings, we heard 782 Main Chatham LLC indicate that it would like relief from the typical seasonal ZBA conditions. Consequently, we decided to write this letter informing the ZBA that although we were in favor of their applications, we are also requesting that the ZBA impose the typical seasonal ZBA conditions, which we understand to be as follows. Number one, between June 15th and Labor Day, A, no exterior construction will be allowed. B, no work shall be permitted on weekends. C, construction activity between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only. Then number two, all construction activity and vehicles to be contained on site. If these typical seasonal ZBA conditions are not imposed, then we are concerned not only about the effect on the overall impact of the construction on the enjoyment of a Chatham summer for all residents and visitors, but also on our ability in good conscience to rent our property. It would not be fair to our tenants to charge them for a rental home in Chatham that will be disturbed on a daily basis by construction so close to our house. Therefore, although we support 782 Chatham LLC's application, we request the ZBA impose the typical seasonal ZBA conditions. And that's the extent of the correspondence. Is there any other one, folks here or on Microsoft Teams that wish to speak against?
Ms. Freeman would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's Gloria Freeman. I have spoken in the past generally against what is being proposed at this location, and I'd like to do that again. It bothers me a lot, that representatives refer to apartments. But in the past, they have stated that these are condos and high-end condominium, as well as the commercial space. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I know the state says we can't differentiate regarding ownership. We always hear that the units are being called apartments and not condos. So if you're counting on attainable housing or small A affordable housing, please put it in writing. There is so much wrong with this plan. Beginning with, there is just too much that is wanted on too small a lot. But importantly, this is a business district, not a residential district. You know that each zone, residential, business, and industrial, has requirements to regulate lot size, siting, and bulk or density. I know that at this time in Chatham, residential structures are more profitable than general business. But if an applicant wants to build in a general business district, residential standards should be applied. You're going to be dealing with a similar situation next week where large houses are being built on small lots, which they can get away with because the district is general business. I know that the planning board approved the parking, but this is why we have substantive parking problems in the downtown area when such waivers are granted. With all due respect, just because the planning board can give parking waivers doesn't mean they should. And I should point out that there was a requirement at the planning board meeting that there are to be 2 assigned parking spaces for each of the apartments, and 1 for each was to be in front of the building. And I did talk to, by way of email, Sarah about this today. It was looked up in community development, and yes, that had been omitted from the conditions. I could go on about the lack of green space and recreational space, about the narrow entrance and egress, but I'll just say that I hope you will deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Frame. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against this?
I just have a couple of
No,
questions.
you cannot speak from that chair.
I'm sorry. I have to get up?
You have to go
Yes.
to the microphone, and you have to tell us who you are.
Okay.
Anyway, Sarah, back to, is there anyone else in the audience?
There is no one else on Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
My name is Jill Price, and my husband and I own the house on the westerly side.
Are you the author of the letter that I wrote, read?
Yes.
Are you going to say something different than what was in
I just have a question. I'm not against what they're doing.
Okay.
I have a concern, maybe. On the landscape plan, it said something about remove or replace a fence. They don't have a fence. We have a fence. So I don't understand that. And then the other thing on that same plan, in two different places, it says that they're 15 feet away. In a couple of other places, one was 11 and one might have been 8. I just thought maybe that was a plan from 2018 and it wasn't corrected because the writing says they're 15 feet. So I don't know if that was a mistake or they're gonna be 8 feet, because that's what they are now, about 8 feet. And I need to ask Matt maybe, but he asked me about the telephone pole. There's one telephone pole there that only serves our house. And they want to move it and put their things on it, which we have no problem with. But how am I gonna know that that is gonna happen? Say if you approve. Now, do I know that it's gonna be paid for by them, that the Comcast is gonna be moved by them? How do I prove it?
Okay, that has nothing to do with their
With you.
application in front of us, right?
Okay,
So you'd have to discuss that with Mr. Cole.
which I have.
Okay, that's it.
All right, I just had that question. And the other one was about the landscape plan, and maybe that's an error. Maybe that's from 2018?
We'll find out.
All right, thanks.
That it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Would you like some rebuttal time? And also, could you please answer the lady's question on the fence?
Sarah, would you mind putting up the landscape plan? I'm not seeing the dimension.
You have a point, I'll leave it right there if you want.
I'm not actually seeing the 8-foot dimension, but I know that the dimension is coming from the steps. The building itself is 15 feet from setbacks. To clarify in some of the earlier conversation as well, the size of this building and the location of this building is within all setbacks. It is conforming in that the amount of building that is allowed on the site is what is being proposed on the site. The amount of green space that should be on the site is proposed on the site. Everything with the size scale of this building and of the green space and of everything related to it is per the Chatham bylaws and meeting the setbacks, meeting all the requirements. Steps are allowed to be over under a certain amount of square footage, and so the steps into the apartments are what you're seeing with that 8-foot dimension. It's because this is a very narrow lot. So they're coming out the 11.1 foot. You said I have a pointer. I don't know how to, oh, look at that. Sorry. How great. The 11.1 foot that you were seeing right there, that's for the steps, not the building. And then further back where you see 8 feet, Is that also for steps? Come on, please.
Thad Aldridge, Southeast. The dimensions in red are the existing dimensions, and the dimensions in blue are the proposed. The 10.8, the 11.1 that you can see on the plan in blue are to the proposed steps that are 28 square feet and 30 square feet. We have an exemption in the bylaw, steps and stoops not exceeding 30 square feet need not meet the setback. And we went through great pains to make sure that every step was not exceeding that 30 square feet. The building itself, you can see a 15.2, 15.1, that's to the corner board.
Well, there was, relative to the fence, there we go. Existing fence to remain or to be replaced. We did not know who the owner of the fence is. We do want to make sure that a fence stays there, and so on this drawing and for the plan, that's why we called it out as to remain or be replaced. I'm sure we'll work out during construction, as Matt's already contacted you, if you want your existing to remain or if you would want a new one to go in its place.
With regard to construction seasonal conditions, all the conditions listed by the prices are acceptable. And we would expect they'd be incorporated into an order on any approval if we get one. And then also, just on the issue of the apartments, I hate getting sucked into semantic discussions. Apartments are apartments. You know, condominium is how you own them, and whether you sell them separately. But these units are approximately 700 square feet each. So, you know, if that gives you some idea of, you know, how they'll fit into the marketplace, you know, you all have your own opinions about what that means. I think 700 square feet means attainable. So, especially when put over commercial space. So, and I can't remember there being any other questions out there to address from the
All
board.
right. Well, let's go to questions from the board now.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's start with Megan.
Question for any of you, I suppose, representing him. Is the intention, and I know that can change at any moment, so I don't mean to pigeonhole you forever, but is the intention to rent the apartments or sell them?
We'll let the owner tell you.
So the intention is to rent the apartments. We through all of our presentations in 2018 and today, never made a representation that we had contemplated or planned on condos, and any assertion of such is a bold-faced lie.
Okay.
Our present intention is to rent the units that are on the plan in front of you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear that up for everybody listening, including us. Hold on one sec, I'm sorry. And I think my only other question would be relative to the parking. The parking plan that the planning board made you ascribe to, is that, like, are those parking spots gonna be, like, don't park here because this is for the tenants and there'll be 2 for each unit? Is that how that's gonna go?
Yeah, just, first of all, just to clarify, we did not seek a waiver of parking requirements from the planning board because we calculated and provided parking on site that
Okay.
met the requirements. There was a question in the planning board, your bylaw, we're learning to love your bylaw, actually says the planning board can take into consideration whether or not a use needs more parking. And so there was a discussion about whether it required more parking than the parking schedules provided for, but we did provide the parking as required. I think as Ms. Freeman noted in her presentation, and Sarah was kind enough to call me today, there's a question whether the planning board should have included in their planning board site plan review decision a condition that 8 spaces be marked as available for the apartments, which is fine with the applicant. So I think what we're going to do is go back and just listen to the tape to see if that was a condition, and I think staff will do the same thing. And if an amended decision from the planning board needs to come out, it'll come out. But you can certainly, you know, if you think that that's part of what you think is important, you can impose that condition that 8 spaces be noted by signage.
While I'm asking the question, I will note for the board that I don't know what came out of the planning board and would certainly defer to them if that was noted as a condition. However, I would not put it as a condition if I were the one making the decision, because presumably these apartments will have vacated tenants during the day that can park and get their pizza, but that's just my own personal.
Paul?
I guess as I read your paragraph 1 on the variance criteria responses, you indicate under a literal enforcement of the bylaw, in order to continue having more than 3 apartment units on the property, the applicant would have to preserve the existing apartment building. And the physical condition and configuration and location of that building creates issues of safety, unsightliness, and use. During the apartment's unit's age and antiquated layouts and constructions, and the inability to remove and replace it with a new structure will significantly impair the value, utility, and visual quality of the property. So is that basically saying that under a little enforcement of the bylaw, you cannot obtain a special permit?
No, I don't, what we're saying is that absent this relief, this variance relief, the applicant is faced with not undertaking the project, which means they're stuck with the building that's there. So, they've been, and you can all tell, this has been out there for several years now. I think we were in front of you 2018, and it goes, we try to get the relief, we can't get the relief, back off, is it worth doing? Construction's getting more expensive, it's getting more difficult. So what we're saying is, absent this relief, the applicant, one of their choices is to keep this building there, which I don't think they want to do, and I don't think the town wants them to. And that's a hardship for the applicant, being stuck with this old building.
I was a little confused then by your suggestion that we should be considering both this and the special exception at the same time.
Well, no, the special permit is required. Because, the apartments incidental to commercial use is a use that's only available by special permit in the GB2 district. So we need both the variance from the dimensional requirement of the 10,000, but we also need that special permit to have apartments over.
Okay. And the way that the hardship is tied to the land is how?
It's tied to the building. Your bylaw says it's, owing to circumstances involving the land, building, or structure is what your bylaw says. 4810 just says land. It's the building itself. It's this particular building, because of the way it was created and the way it was developed and the way it exists, and what they're stuck with right now is this building. And so, and that's it.
And the hardship, as I understand it, is the inability to obtain a better value for the
part of that
rent?
Yeah, part of that is, what the bylaw says, financial or otherwise. So part of it's financial, a 3-unit development is better for the applicant. A 4-unit would have been better for them. Just look, they're gonna have to spend money to build this building. If they can have more units, they have more rent. If we go down to 2, yes, each unit will rent for more, but you're better off having more units. So it's financial, but it's also just the ability to use the building for, what they want to use it for. It's private property.
So do you agree that the hardship here is not related to the configuration of the land, its size, or soil configuration? You're simply basing it on the building?
It's the building, and it's the shape of the building and the location of the building back in the lot. So it is tied to the land. It's a very long, narrow lot as well.
Okay, I have no other questions.
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Mr. Thompson, again, has no questions for Mr. Zender.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as the variance requirements, what about Part 3, that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the bylaw? Counsel, could you speak to that?
I think I did my initial presentation, but I'm happy to do it. First of all, I think the intent of this bylaw really is to make sure that the density of apartments is tied to the size of the lot. As I heard, I think one of the members' comments, that's an idea in zoning that is sort of becoming less and less popular, because we're realizing that when you begin to tie apartments to the 10,000 square feet in some towns, you really render apartment development impossible in the districts in which it's located. So to find a 70,000 square foot lot in the GB2 district that you can put 7 apartments on is very, very difficult to do. So, but as I think as Paul correctly said, the bylaw we have is the bylaw we have. But the bylaw, as I understand it now, is really moving more and more and more towards facilitating attainable housing and affordable housing. It really wants that, and the people have spoken, and it's frustrating because every time you go in with something, people say, no, we don't want it here. That's the whipsaw that we get. But because this lot already has 5 units on it, it's not as if we're coming in and trying to put 4 units on 18,000 square feet. We're not creating the density. The density is already there. In fact, we're decreasing the density. So that's why it's not derogating from the purpose or the spirit of the bylaw. We're decreasing the density as well as creating that housing that the bylaw, generally speaking, really wants to have created. I would suggest that the planning board may want to look at that density requirement at some point, especially in line with the fact that the towns have now gone to town water and town sewer. Those are factors on that basis. So I hope I addressed your question, Ms. Potter. Okay, thank you.
Dave Each.
I have no questions, Dave.
Buck.
So we're talking about variance relief, right?
Yes.
It seems like there's been some mixing and jumping around.
I do my best to mix it up, confuse everybody. Yeah.
Well, that might not be in your
No, I know.
client's best interest.
I know.
So you're asking for relief on the 40,000 square feet for the 3 in the back and the 1 in the front,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
I hate to ask you this, but I don't hear your argument. You're basically saying, we need to do this, we need value, we need money for our investment, which would result in overly large units. That's the last or second to last sentence in the first paragraph. And in the second paragraph, it says, when the building was moved to the property, which I think that you're referring to 1984-85, 4 apartment units, which combined with the units above the building, resulted in 5 total. But I think we've already heard tonight that that's not a true statement.
The timing is a little, yeah, I want to give Leslie a chance to respond, but you're right. The 4 units were created sometime after it was moved to the site, sometime after 1984.
Well, I heard one person suggest, I guess, that it came with 2 apartments and somebody after it was located there added 2 more apartments without permits. Is that a misstatement?
No, it is not. If I could just dive into some history of all of this, because I've spent a long time looking at all of the buildings. When the property was purchased, it had 4 apartments in that back building, and those 4 apartments were rented. And they were rented for quite some time. They have fallen into disrepair. That building is a very difficult building. We've looked at it for how do you add life safety and the current requirements to it. It's 4 units. It should have a sprinkler. It should have a lot of things that it does not have, and would be very hard to get into these old houses that had been moved onto the site. And at some point, before the purchase of the property, turned into 4 apartments. It was bought with the thought that we can get rental income from 4 apartments, that we're builders, and we can have this property, this building that has 4 rental units. We looked at the project when we saw that they couldn't just be rehabbed as creating 4 more housing units. That was the original proposal that came before this board. But that was not allowed because that was over 50% of the commercial use. Therefore, we've modified our plan so that there is still some rental property, there's still the rental income that has always been afforded in these buildings, a hardship in a building change financially. We added, in a sense, or we reduced the footprint, but we added commercial space so that we could continue to have at least 3 residential units.
Okay, so I don't know who's going to answer this, but I'll take either answer from either of you. The requirement of hardship, can you say that in less than 2 sentences, how you're qualified for hardship?
By financially having less rental units than currently could be allowed on the property.
One more time, please.
By financially having less rental units than currently can be allowed on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, I did the same point that Buck brought up about, was the building moved with 4 units or not? Is that a fact?
I believe it was moved as a duplex.
It was moved as 2 houses. As we looked at it,
With two apartments in each half of the duplex, in other words, in the.
Correct. In
Okay.
each one of those.
So it was 4 apartments when it was moved there?
No, it was homes when it was moved there. It was private
It was
homes.
2 single-family dwellings that I believe used to be located where
One was at
At
693 Main Street.
693 Main Street and maybe 691 Main Street were the former addresses, and there were 2 single-family dwellings that were moved there
Okay, so it was moved as 2 single family.
and then converted.
So what you have in here is not correct? Wait, what? In number 2, in the variance criteria response that Buck brought up, when the building was moved to the property, it contained 4 apartment units.
Yeah, that's an incorrect statement. That was a mistake on our part. It was,
Okay.
yeah, that was.
I mean, help me out here with the parking. I just want to understand. What does the, and I probably should know this by now, what's the bylaw say? So it's two parking spaces per apartment unit?
Correct.
And then 2 for the office
No,
is required?
it's 1 parking space for every
Square foot?
100 or 150 square feet.
150.
150 square feet of business use.
And so the office is how many square feet?
The business use is
Business use.
450 square feet. It's the public use.
It's calculated as the spaces that are open to the public is what it does. It's an unusual bylaw,
Yeah,
so, but we comply with it.
okay.
And also, just to get on top of that as well, there was a lot of discussion at planning board about the sufficiency of the parking. The other thing that's happened here, as Matt can tell you, is a lot of the work that's happening in these businesses is happening virtually, meaning they're not seeing the number of people parking that used to be parking. And that adds on to also what we call the complementary parking dynamic, which people theoretically will go out during the day, go to work, and then at night when they come back, the businesses are closed, and the parking is an overlap in terms of not overlap, so.
Yeah, yeah. And then a couple of things, and this may be for Jay. I mean, if they came in and wanted to renovate that building, the 4-unit building, they would be subject to all the same things right here, right? Correct?
If they wanted to renovate the existing structure?
If they came in and said, we're gonna renovate these 4 apartments as they exist, they would be thrown into all of these questions and regulations.
Yeah,
and
I mean, they're not
requirements as
entitled
well.
to 4 apartments, so I don't know how we'd get there.
Right.
It's not allowed in that district.
So once they came in with a plan, then if they wanted to do that, they would be subject to all the same.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
they-
Your
they're going
interpretation.
for apartments incidental to the commercial use, which is what it was originally
Yeah.
permitted for, so they're trying to follow the bylaw
Mm-hmm.
with that respect.
Okay. Then, is there ever, like, there must be 4, are there 4, is like an apartment A, B, C, and D back there or something like that? So is there ever any cross-checking, like with a post office on that? Like if we became aware, like if you became aware of that somehow, that there were 4 apartments in there?
I'm sure there are a lot of violations in town. I mean,
Oh, I'm
I
sure there are
don't know
too.
how,
I'm just-
even assessors is the best bet to find, but, we usually report to them, but we
Yeah.
don't usually hear back. It's not a symbiotic relationship,
Oh, no, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, I'll save the rest of it for deliberation.
Okay, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that? Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. Deliberations. Let's start with Randy. Randy. Why not?
So, I want to say yes. If I were voting, I started this whole thing with wanting to say yes and wanting to go against Jay, but after I did the research that I thought was appropriate and talking to him, I didn't feel that I could because of what Dave said, that you can't just support an illegality. So I start with what I want to do and then try to do it. I want to find that you meet the criteria for the variance, and I think you probably hit a little bit on each of the criteria, because it does say, that finance counts, so I would probably vote for it, because at the end of the day, we have a lot of hidden gems on the Cape, but this is like a hidden nightmare. It is awful. I went back there and I couldn't believe it. There's so much junk and even a gas grill that's back there, that can't be good for the environment. So thank God, you're gonna clean it up, and I hope my colleagues allow you to do that. Because the way it is now is a complete disaster area. And so I would support it if I were voting.
Thank you.
Dave Feach.
I'm of the same frame of mind as Randy. I can find that it meets the criteria, and I will support a variance for this. And I'm hopeful that my colleagues will agree with me on that. I mean, there's certainly no question that this is, what they're proposing is something that it would be a benefit for the town as well as to the applicant. Small apartments like this, incidental to a commercial use, are going to be inherently better than in this setting, in that situation, than I think the previous proposal was. And certainly, improving the condition of, and putting a new building in there in place of what is there, is going to be a great improvement for the town, for the neighborhood, for everything else. I hope that we can find the ways to support this endeavor, because I think in the complete analysis of it, this is going to be much better for the town than what's there.
Buck.
Well, I don't think every lot has to be developed or can be developed, or to maximize profit and value. It seems to me that some of the statements made in this criteria response are questionable, and I agree with the two previous speakers that we need attainable housing, and it would be a benefit, but we're trying to squeeze something into a lot that's too small, and I can't support it.
Bill.
Yeah, I think, granting a variance is not supposed to be simple. It has very specific requirements. When I try to match up what our criteria are to the responses, they simply, I think the third one does, they don't match to me. I don't see the criteria responses of any value here. The site, yes, that's the shape of the site, but, they shoehorned a building in there, 20, how many years ago, 30 plus years ago. That's what it is, I don't think your response addresses whether they meet criteria 1 at all, but all being said, yeah, if you look at it on the basis of what the site, the shape of the site and whatnot, yeah, you could maybe make the argument that it does meet that. Number 2, the whole question of substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, I frankly don't see that being met here. So I think unfortunately, because I do agree with what everyone said, I wish there was a way that, that you could, we could make this happen, but I don't see it meeting the very strict requirements of the variance, and if I were voting, I would probably vote no.
Megan.
I think everybody knows where I stand, but taking apartments away from this town is not something I can support, regardless of whether or not they were illegal or not. There have been people living in them for 25 or 30 years with some regularity, and I really can't support that. I personally think that you have met the qualifications for a variance, but I also want to suggest that the variance hardship should apply to the townspeople and the neighbors and not just the people who own the property. And in this case, if we don't grant the variance, then it's the town that suffers. it's the neighbors that suffer, because you're not gonna renovate a building that financially doesn't make sense to renovate. It's the town that suffers not only from an affordable housing standpoint, but, I listened to the two speakers speak against the fact that they, do not want residential in this area, except that A, residential already exists there, and B, they're putting in more commercial space, from what I can tell, than was there previously. So actually, the reverse is true in this particular case. We need residential housing, like I've said. We need people to be able to walk to their jobs. But on top of that, I believe you've met the criteria, and even if you didn't, I think that the town deserves the relief for this particular variance. I don't know what else to say, except that I think it makes sense, and sometimes, bylaws can be written in ways that they don't always make sense, but we have to interpret them, as Mr. Thompson would say, with common sense.
Paul?
Well, I think this is one of those situations where the ordinance puts us in a bind and puts you in a bind, in the sense that there are requirements here which you just can't meet effectively in terms of the buildable upland and the requirements that go with that. We've had comments concerning attainable housing or affordable housing. That's not among our criteria as a practical matter, and we're not in a position, I don't think, to require that you rent them out or not sell them, or that some subsequent owner not sell them as units to be used however the potential buyer wants to use them. So I don't think that we can restrict the use the way some people who have commented on it think that we should. So you come back to the question of, well, does it satisfy the criteria for a variance? And I think if you try to look at the standard issues with respect to variance in terms of soil or conditions or size of the lot or location of the lot and so forth, as you have said previously, it's basically a flat lot. It's rectangular in shape. It's a fairly straight rectangle. Unfortunately, the history of the property is such that things have been done there which probably shouldn't have been done. And that is historically the case before there were requirements of site plans and so forth. And you're operating with an overall problem, which is that something was done to the property which was never permitted after a permit was requested, as nearly as we can tell from all of the relevant records. So it becomes much more difficult to say it's consistent with the intent and purpose of the bylaw if, in fact, what happens is that there are additional apartment units there which were requested previously, denied, and then built anyhow. So I end up going around on this, but I have difficulty finding justification for a variance, even though I agree that the overall proposal, if it were being taken anew, is an excellent upgrade to the property and one which would be of benefit to the town in general. I think perhaps the way to go about this is to deal with the criteria that we have to apply, which is the buildable upland concept and the way the property developed historically in terms of use.
Mr. Thompson?
Well, I think what you want to do there is, you should be commended for what you want to do. This town needs housing like you're proposing badly. And you've got to take this, I'm going to try to be nice, but that place over there is deplorable. It needs to be replaced. I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of granting you the variance. And it may, I'm going to be quiet. But you've got my vote.
Well, from my standpoint, several things about this whole thing bother me. In the 4 years since we looked at it last time, nobody's made any effort whatsoever to clean up the mess there. It's like, this makes it look bad, let's make it look bad. The heck with trying to clean it up and make it decent. And that bothers me. It's not our criteria, it's just a general statement. When we come to our criteria, substantial hardship. This isn't substantial hardship. You can build, 2 out back, 1 in front, or 3 out back and none out front, whatever you want to do. That's not substantial hardship that we limit you to that. Secondly, I do believe there's been cases in Massachusetts where situations like this, the courts don't recognize this as a hardship. You can still make a profit, maybe not what you used to, and you bought it this way. It didn't just come to you. I just can't say it. Certainly not the lot. There's nothing unique about it. And as far as the intent and purpose of the bylaw, I just couldn't vote for it. So, Mr. Zender, you have a choice. You could have us vote, if that's what you would like.
Yeah, I would ask you to take a vote on this, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Paul?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay, and the conditions as outlined by the neighbors?
Yes, I would add the conditions, which are basically our standard conditions, with the exception that I think the request was for June 15th instead of June 30th for the time frame, but I think it's agreeable to the applicant. So I would say all construction activity to be contained on site and construction vehicles to be contained on site or off site with the permission of the property owner. That between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction would be allowed. No work would be permitted on weekends, and construction activity between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Okay. So, you vote yes or no?
I'm sorry, I beg the chair's indulgence again. If I want to turn down the request for a variance, I vote no?
That is correct.
No.
Paul?
I'll vote no.
Dave?
Yes.
Dave Veach?
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote no. Okay. Sarah, 22-094.
Application number 22-094, 782 Main Chatham LLC, care of Benjamin E. Zender, Esquire, 62 Route 6A, Suite B, Orleans, Mass. 02653. Owner of property located at 782, 784 Main Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 36, Lot 55. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a nonconforming structure and use on a nonconforming lot via the demolition of the existing structure containing 4 apartments incidental to a commercial use and the construction of a new structure containing 3 apartments incidental to a commercial use, professional office. The existing mixed-use structure located at 782 Main Street will remain unchanged. The existing structure at 784 Main Street is nonconforming and it's set back 8 feet from the westerly abutter and 14.7 feet from the easterly abutter. The proposed structure will comply with the 15-foot abutter setback requirement. The existing lot coverage is 11,973 square feet, 65.5%, and the proposed lot coverage is 12,513 square feet, 68.4%, where 70% is the maximum allowed. The parking is and will remain non-conforming within the easterly and westerly abutter setbacks. The lot contains 18,282 square feet in the GB2 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D2B of the protective bylaw.
Before you go on, Mr. Zender, Sarah, since we turned down the variance, how does that turn down affect this?
So you could still hear the special permit for the structure because it is conforming. They just wouldn't be able to put 3 apartments in said structure
Because of,
because you turned down the required land area,
Okay.
additional land area that they needed to have that one more apartment above what was permitted by the town.
okay. Okay. Mr. Zender?
I'm never sure whether I'm supposed to introduce myself again.
No, no.
So we're going to present on the special permit with one change. I'm going to request of the board that the change to the application be that we provide the building inspector, prior to pulling a building permit, a floor plan showing 2 apartments upstairs instead of 3. And I haven't asked Mr. Briggs yet, but I believe that because we're existing with 3 permanent apartments, we wouldn't need separate relief on that, other than the fact that we do need a special permit for apartments incidental to commercial use in the GB2 district. So with that said, I'm not going to repeat the description of the site of the property. I'm happy to. I know this board's standard practice is that we roll through the special permit granting criteria, and I'm happy to do that if the chair wants. But I would posit to the board that this reconstruction without the variance for the upland land area for the 4th total apartment, for all the other reasons I think some of the members elucidated as well as I did, that this will be a benefit to the town. It will not be substantially more detrimental to create new housing in this location and a new building in this location to address the site. That it will be in conformity with all the zoning bylaws once the permit's granted. So, and I'm at the chair's pleasure if you want me to, we've set forth our criteria. I'm happy to recite them if the board wants, but I would ask the board to consider this with that one change to the plan and consider the special permit grant. And thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have 10 blueprints here, and I'm not sure which blueprints we're now talking about.
We're not talking about any of them.
Oh,
We're approving the building, but inside he's gonna go back to Jay after this. Oh, sorry. We're approving the building, but afterwards he's gonna go back to Jay with the 2 apartment layout, interior layout. But I assume the exterior would remain the same.
Exterior will remain the same, the downstairs will remain the same. The only difference is the interior walls will be reconfigured so that it's no more than 2 apartments upstairs.
Is that okay, Bob?
it's good enough to get going.
All right.
Thank you.
So frankly, I do not think we need to hear the criteria. Thank you, Mr. Zender. So, let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this, please indicate on the screen you wish to talk.
There is no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Okay. We have one additional piece of correspondence here. This was written on October 11th, 2022, and it's from Kathleen Donovan. At their July 25th, 2022 meeting, the planning board voted 6-0-0 to approve the project at 782, 784 Main Street. I have attached the planning board statement of conditions. And I'll try and highlight them. The undersigned, acting as the conditions. Number 1, the physical features and data shown on the site plan entitled Site Plan, prepared for Cape Associates, prepared by East Southeast LLC, dated May 12, 2022, and revised through July 17, 2022, and the landscape plan entitled, quote-unquote, 784 Main Street, dated May 10, 2022, represent the approved design and parking layout of the subject property. Any deviation from the specified uses and layout constitutes a violation of the planning board approval unless it's reviewed and approved by the planning board. Submission pursuant to section so-and-so, bylaw, a performance bond in the amount of $50,000. Number 3, floor plans for the proposed commercial structure and 3 apartments incidental to a commercial use must be reviewed by the Department of Health and the Water and Sewer Commission to establish the sewer flow for the property in accordance with the water and sewer regulations. 4, certification by a licensed professional that all site work is completed and if compliance with the approved plan is required prior to the issuance of the certificate of use and occupancy by the building commissioner. 5, all exterior lighting shall be downward casting and shall be designed so as to not to illuminate areas off the property. 6, submittal of shared easement documents. 7, signage and also arrows painted on the ground to indicate the location of the ingress and egress. And 8, zoning board approval of the 10-foot encroachment of parking spaces as shown on the plan as presented. So this was signed on August 2nd, 2022 by Catherine Halpern, the chairperson. And then we have the same letter from Kenneth and Jill Price that we had with the previous application. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this application? If so, please indicate on the screen you wish to talk.
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition.
Okay, then we can have questions from the board. Dave, start with you.
Mr. Zender,
Yes, sir.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
You're very welcome.
Randy.
I have no questions.
Dave Veach.
No, I have no questions.
Buck.
So I'm looking at print number A2.2. I think that's what you're asking us to approve.
Maybe Sarah can put it up.
$105 feet long by 25 feet wide,
Yes.
and there's going to be 3 doors on it?
There may be,
Well, there are definitely going to be as many doors as are shown. One may turn into a window, in which case we will come back for a request on it. Most likely, it will just become an alternative door into the office space down below.
But you're basically asking us to approve that coverage.
Correct.
No more questions.
Bill.
Just have a question for the applicant. Have you ever, did you consider going to a 3-unit building in the back and taking the front building and just making it, being commercial, use commercial, and take that apartment away in that building?
The front building is much smaller than 50% of the back building, and the front building is very viable. It has an apartment, and it's working really well as it is. I mean, it's a good building. It's in great shape, and historically, it's very appropriate for where it is on the street. So no, we did not. I'm sorry. We like it and think it's a good building, and we can't. We did look at putting a building in the back, but that was residential units, but it was much larger than 50% of the commercial.
So, I mean, just, getting back to the, even though we're on the special permit, I guess the hardship question, if you did the 3 units in the back, just like you would like to do,
That's what we originally looked to do, was put a
but
residential
then take
completely
the
in the back.
apartment away from the front building and make that some kind of a commercial, because it is a commercial zone. So, I'm just throwing that out there.
It would be quite difficult to put commercial space on the second floor of that building since it doesn't exist right now. Commercial spaces, as far as access, accessibility, all the different things, that we did not look at that. We didn't think it was feasible.
Megan.
I have no questions.
Paul.
I have no questions.
Okay.
Before I move to close the hearing and move into deliberations, I would point out that we have the special permit criteria responses that have been provided by Mr. Zender, and they are a part of the record. So that's available, and we've all reviewed them. So I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote on that, Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
I vote yes. Randy?
So I think the silver lining on it perhaps is that these larger apartments will lend themselves to families versus, just single people. So I'm hoping that, and I'm sorry that my colleagues didn't see fit to grant you the variance, but I would
Thank you.
approve this if I were voting.
Thank you.
Dave Veach?
Yes, I'll approve it. I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm very disappointed that the net result is that there's going to be larger apartments. I don't think that's correct, right for the town. Enough said.
Buck?
Well, I'm having trouble. We're voting on an outside with no prints of the inside. I've never done that here before. I don't understand the justification for it. I don't know why we should be deviating from what we normally do. That's just the way I think. You know, we always get the inside floor plan. Some people look at it, some people don't. But at the moment, I don't feel comfortable approving just a blank coverage.
Bill?
I mean, I think Buck makes a good point. I think overall, at this point, if they're going to if that's what they want to do, and go to 2 apartments, and, assuming the floor plan can come back and we can take a look at it, that I would support it.
Megan?
I am wholeheartedly in agreement with Dave Veach and somewhat embarrassed by this. So if I were voting, I would absolutely support it.
Paul?
I agree. I do not think it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, certainly, and I think we can rely on the internal review by the building commissioner with respect to satisfying our code requirements and so forth. I don't see a need to review the internal layout under these circumstances.
Dave Thompson?
Dave Thompson is a little bit lost for words. Dave Thompson is exceedingly angry. Dave Thompson does not get angry very often, but he is. I'm in favor of this. I think it's ridiculous that we can't have 3 little apartments for young couples, 2 people, maybe 2 people and a baby, in town. It's disgusting.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the application as submitted with its amended form, with the conditions that all construction activity would be contained on site and construction vehicles would be contained on site or off-site with the permission of the property owner, that between June 15th and Labor Day, there would be no exterior construction allowed. No work will be permitted on weekends, and construction activity between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay, we need a vote. Buck?
Buck votes no.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave Thompson?
Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. That passes 4-1.
Thank you all for your time. Nice
Thank
to
you,
see you all
Mr.
again. Yeah, thank you all.
Do we have some minutes? Do we have minutes? No.
There are no minutes today, however, you will have minutes next week.
Paul, could you move to adjourn, please?
I will move to adjourn.
Okay, well, I'll be voting on this, Dave, if you would
Dave
second it,
seconds.
yeah?
Buck votes yes.
Bill?
Bill votes yes.
Megan?
Megan votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Yes.
Randy?
Dave Veach votes yes.
I vote yes. And what's the official time?
It is 5:28 PM.
Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you, one and all.